Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Sever7, and today we are taking a look at the Medford Knives Antik. And that's with the ultimate goal of seeing if it's worth adding to your collection or your daily carry rotation. Now, this was sent to me from Heroic EDC. That's the name of his Instagram and the name of his shop. Um, he's got cool stuff in stock, but they sell it pretty quick. He still has some of these Spyderco and Lion Steel Slim integrals that seem to be sold out everywhere. Um, but check his shop out. He's getting some really cool stuff in. He's got Machine Wise, other Medfords. Definitely worth browsing and shopping. Now, this knife was designed by Medford Knife and Tool and is also OEM'd by Medford Knife and Tool. So, jumping right into it, we've got this really nice green anodized scales. We've got some matching green hardware. It looks like we've got some brass hardware down here that matches the pivot collar. We've got that same bronze for the pocket clip. Overall, just a very clean, minimalistic design. We've got some nice milling with this like triple stripe design. Overall, very clean and very minimalistic, while still being a full size knife. So, big fan. Milled deep carry titanium pocket clip, and I want to add it's got a hand brushed finish to it. We also have a spot for a lanyard, and then we've got about a 95% backspacer, which is a tumbled finish. Very clean. As far as ergonomics go, so we don't have any crazy contouring, but what we have is this like slab style construction. So it's thin and flat, and then all of the edges have been knocked down, rounded, softened. What you end up with is a very neutral and very comfortable feel in hand. So pocket clip disappears. This right here, because it's been chamfered and thinned out for the lock bar access, if you squeeze real tight here, this can become a little bit of a hot spot. But I mean, that's only if you hold it a certain way and if you squeeze really, really tight, right? For most people, if you just hold this like a normal knife and apply pressure, you're fine. But there is a world in which you could put this in your hand and squeeze really hard, and it's not a hot spot, but at least a warm spot, right? But if you just pick it up, hold it like a normal person does, apply pressure to it, you'll be fine, right? It's one of those things where, like, if you're looking for a hot spot, you could find it, but if you're not, you won't. Overall, though, very comfortable. Pocket clip disappears in hand, and it's neutral. And neutral means a great fit for most, not a perfect fit for any. And this falls right in line with that. This is going to be a great fit for most people. Now, jumping over to the blade, we have a flat ground CPM S45 VN. That's going to have good edge retention, good corrosion resistance. As far as its edge retention, it looks like we're going to be sitting at about 5.5 out of 10. So decent edge retention, decent toughness, and really good corrosion resistance. Now, we do have a kind of semi-mirror on the flat and on the belt satin, although the flat is much more reflective. Classic drop point style blade. I mean, maybe a slight tanto, but honestly, that's going to come out the first time you sharpen it. We have the Medford logo right here and the number 4, and I'm not sure what the number 4 signifies. So anybody that knows Medford better than me, which is probably most of you, let me know what that 4 is. And then back here, we've got 409-25, which I assume is the number, like what number made this is. So I assume it's number 409 and the year it was made is 25. But also correct me if I'm wrong. That's just what I'm assuming. As far as sharpening goes, we have a well executed sharpening choil and plunge grind. So you're going to be able to sharpen quite a bit. You'll certainly get your money's worth out of this blade. Obviously, it depends on how harshly or how aggressively you sharpen your knives. But I mean, you're going to get probably 6 or 7 sharpenings before you even start to show a smile. So I think that's pretty fantastic. Plenty of life to get out of this. Now, Medford makes their knives to be users, right? They take pride in things being a basic tool, and it's almost like they go out of their way to make things that aren't so pretty you wouldn't want to use it. Now, with that being said, this knife has a ton of customization options. So you can customize the scales individually. You can customize the anodization of the hardware. They even have a few with like this galaxy looking flame ano, which I mean, admittedly looks gorgeous. So plenty of options for this guy. Let's talk a little bit about the action. Now, most Medford knives run on washers. This one, I believe, is on bearings. And the action is spectacular. The acoustics on the way out and on the way down are good. Nice positive clunk into the open position. And a nice little clink at the bottom. Pivot is incredibly smooth. Like, there is some resistance there. So it almost feels like smooth washers than it does bearings. But I love the feeling of washers that have broken in, and that's the feeling I'm getting from this. And I don't have a lot of room here, so I have to do a bunch of little shakes, but you can single shake shut it pretty effortlessly. Yeah, detent's dialed in. It's not hard. So for this knife, they had to do a few things to get the action just right. Obviously, the pivot tension, right? Because they want it to be smooth, but they didn't want it to be like guillotine. Also, the weight of the blade had to be factored in, and then it had to be tuned for a front flipper. Given all those things, I think they executed it perfectly. This is the first Medford I've ever handled, so I'm not 100% sure like what their knives typically feel like. But I can say that for a first impression, this knife is killing it. Just overall, a fantastic job. Now let's talk about specs. Overall, we're at 8.25 inches, so we're a full-size knife. A blade length of 3.75 and a blade to handle ratio of, I believe, 0.75, but let me double check that really quick. And to calculate that, all I do is I take the blade length divided by the handle length. So this is a handle length of 4.5. So I would do 3.75 divided by 4.5. And that gives me, oh wow, that gives me a blade to handle ratio of 0.83. And if we look, yeah, it looks like he gave us about as much as he possibly could. I mean, there really isn't any room left except for, enough room for clearance. That is about it. Um, that was on me. But if we open it up and we look, we're at that 0.83. So we can see kind of a 50-50 look between the blade and the handle. Like we've got that ratio. And it looks fantastic. That's one of the things I love about this knife is that it's got such a good blade to handle ratio. So really fantastic work. And then as far as weight, we're at 4.4 ounces, which isn't quite, the perfect inch our inch per ounce ratio. I was forgetting the word ratio for a second because we're at 3.75 inches for blade. Ideally, we'd want to be at 3.75 ounces. But these scales are thicker, and then we do have a full titanium backspacer. Those things add to the weight. I'm willing to bet without the backspacer, we'd probably be right about there. I mean, I don't want to say a backspacer's half an ounce, but minus the backspacer, and maybe like a millimeter thinner on the scales, it would probably be right there. So I'm not mad at it. Now, for some size comparisons, we're going to do the milled aluminum Civivi Brazen, one of the best Civivis ever made. We're going to do the real steel Sylph, made shorter because I rolled the tip. And then we're going to do one of my favorite budget knives of the year so far, the Migaron Gatov. And as we can see, the Medford Antik is coming in quite a bit bigger than both. All right, so what is the price on this guy? So this model is just shy of $700. I think it's like $670 on the website. Is it worth that much? There's a few things we have to consider. This is going to be because you can look at knives and say, hey, I can get a concept with that same material for $200, right? CPS S45 VN, titanium, so that's fair. The real cost driver here is going to be the fact that it's American made, right? And the second you enter the world of American made, you're typically looking at 500 plus, right? 500 plus, you see your like your Nkosi's, Sebenzas. 600 plus, you start to see your Umnumzans. And that's for like mid tech, right? And these are mid techs, right? Because they have a lot of hand elements to them, and the blades are hand ground and sharpened and things like that. So we have to consider one, American made, and two, we have to consider mid tech because of how much of the work is done in house, by a professional. So, given those aspects of it, this thing's well, and this one has some custom anno work done to it, and that drives the cost up a bit. But given those factors, yes, $670. I ideally, and I know I'm nitpicking a little bit here. Ideally, I would be in love if this knife was like 625. Being at 670, and I can't say everything that goes into this knife. I can't say specifically why I think that, but we all just kind of get a feeling of like what we think a knife should cost. And I think at 625, this thing would be right there with McNeese, which I think is realistic competition for this knife. And I would love to see it closer to that price point. Now, there could be things that Medford does that McNeese doesn't that absolutely drives the price up, and I'm just not aware of them. That's perfectly fair. So admittedly, the 625 is just coming out of thin air, more or less. But if I had to price this, I would love to see it at 625, right? So, but 670 is not bad. I mean, we're still talking American made. We're still talking, high quality materials, and despite this knife looking fairly basic, there's still a lot of machining that goes into it. to soften all the edges, make sure, even though it's slab construction, make sure there's no hot spots, there's nothing poking out at you. And they accomplish that, right? So, do I think this knife is worth 670? I would say at the higher end of what it should be, yeah, definitely under 700. But at 670, provided I got to pick out my colors and stuff, yeah, I would pay 670 for this knife. This is going to be another example of where the the knife is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Because there is a level of execution here that's just hard to put on paper, right? Because you could say, titanium frame lock with bearings, and that could mean a billion different things. More times than not, it's going to be kind of a guillotine, loosey goosey, kind of, just a whatever bearing knife. But this one here is executed so well. And ultimately, that's where I'm getting my justification for wanting the knife, right? Because I'm eventually going to buy one. But it's just like, with like a luxury car, you can, put all the specs down on paper. I had a Toyota 86 and it was a $25,000 car, or 27,000 whenever I bought it. It was in the same class as your Mustangs, as your Camaros, your Challengers, your Chargers, and the Toyota 86 had half the horsepower, right? So it's almost like, why would I pay this much when I can get one of the others, Mustang or whatever, for about the same price, way more performance? And then I get into the car and I'm driving it, and it's like, I've never felt better handling in my life. Like, even with the 205 horsepower or whatever it had, I felt like I was a sports car racer because of how low to the ground I was, how easy it was to take tight turns. I mean, every trip to Walmart felt like I was like on a little track. And that's not something I felt whenever I drove the Mustang or whenever I drove the Charger, right? I just didn't get that same feeling of the thrill of the drive, and that's ultimately what made me buy the Toyota 86. Same thing here. There's just a feel, an execution of this knife that was done in such a way that it just feels so much greater than the sum of its parts. That might be the American manufacturing, or it could be something exclusive to Medford. But I am in love with this knife. I think they nailed it. Definitely one of my favorite knives of the year. And I haven't tried other Medfords. I don't know what they're like. I know people talk a lot of crap on them. This is just from my experience. The things that I've heard about him are that he's like racist and, a bigot. But then I've watched some of his content, not a lot of it, but I've watched him rant about China, and I legitimately didn't hear anything racist out of his mouth. It sounded like he was being really critical of their economy and comparing how American production, cost wise, can't match China because they can produce items at a loss. I'm not sure how true that is, but it seemed like really harsh critiquing of their economy and their government. I didn't hear anything racist about Chinese people, though, right? So, if people are taking that content and they're judging him based on that, then I completely disagree. Based on what I watched, I haven't seen much of his content, but based on that video that I watched where he was calling out China and doing a direct comparison between Chinese manufacturing and American manufacturing, I didn't hear anything racist in there at all. So that's not to say he isn't. I don't know him, and I haven't seen much other of his content. But based on what I've been exposed to, he seems like an aggressive, brutally honest guy that can come off like a jackass, but in reality, it seemed like pretty milk toast views. Like, it didn't sound like he was saying anything crazy. It just sounded like an honest comparison. So Once again, that's just based on my experience, though. So, for those of you who have more experience or more specific examples or whatever, feel free to share those in the comments. I certainly don't want anybody basing their entire opinion on somebody, specifically on my limited exposure to them. So, take what I say with a grain of salt. Otherwise, check out Heroic EDC. Like I said, he gets really cool stuff in, this knife being one of those things. And the stuff he's getting tends to sell out pretty quick. So he has a newer shop, but he's super responsive on social media. I've chatted him up. He's been great. This genuinely seems like a great person. So that's all I've got. For me, this would absolutely be a daily user. But let me know for you. Is it a collection item at this price point? Or is this a daily carry? Or did this knife just miss the mark for you altogether? I'm really interested to read your thoughts down below. If you like the video, hit the like button. Please subscribe. And until the next time, guys, peace.